The wind howled across the Scottish Highlands, dragging swirls of snow over the heather-covered slopes like the breath of some sleeping giant. The air was sharp, biting, and cruel. And yet, in her weathered cabin nestled at the forest's edge, Elena Moore felt peace. She had grown used to the cold, both outside and within. It had been 5 winters since she left London, trading the noise and rush of the city for solitude and silence. 5 years since her fiancé, Ryan, had slipped from a cliff's edge during a his final scream lost to the wind, like an unfinished sentence. Since then, the only companions Elena kept were her camera, her thoughts, and the endless whisper of the woods. Nature didn't ask questions. It simply was. She liked that. She pulled her woolen scarf tight and stepped outside, boots crunching the snow. Dawn was only just breaking, casting the forest in silvery blue. The stillness was complete. No birds, no rustling, only the faint crackle of frost forming on bare branches. That's when she heard it. A long, low howl. It wasn't a dog. It wasn't a fox. It wasn't any sound that belonged here. Elena froze. Another howl followed. Closer this time. Lower. Weaker. Heart-quickening. She grabbed her DSLR from the table and slung her satchel across her back. Whatever it was, it needed help or it was hunting. Either way, she needed to see. She followed the sound through the trees, past the frozen stream and toward a thicket of pine that bordered a deep gully. Snow fell from the branches above in soft whispers, clinging to her shoulders, melting against her flushed cheeks. Her boots sank deeper as she pressed forward, until she reached a clearing where the howl had last echoed. And there it was. A wolf. No, something smaller. Younger. It lay half buried in snow, shivering violently, its leg caught in a snare made from rusted wire and fraying rope. Blood stained the snow beneath it. One ear was ragged, possibly frostbitten. Its eyes, pale and haunted, flicked toward her. Elena's breath caught. Wolves didn't live in the Highlands. Not anymore. Not for centuries. There had been rumors, escaped specimens from private breeders, reintroductions in secret, but nothing confirmed. And yet, here one lay. Real. Wounded. Alone. She dropped to her knees. The animal didn't growl or snarl. It simply watched. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm not going to hurt you." Her voice cracked. She hadn't spoken aloud in days. She pulled a multi-tool from her bag and slowly reached toward the snare. The wolf flinched but didn't pull away. With trembling fingers, Elena clipped the wire. The tension released with a snap, and the creature whimpered, rolling slightly onto its side. The wound was deep, but not fatal. At least, not yet. "I have to get you out of here," she said, more to herself than to the animal. She wrapped her scarf around its torso, lifting gently. It was surprisingly light, all bone and fur. She cradled it to her chest and began the slow trek back to the cabin. Each step was a prayer against slipping. Her arms burned. The snow thickened. But the wolf didn't struggle. It simply lay against her, breathing shallowly. It wasn't until she reached her porch and opened the cabin door that she realized the gravity of what she'd done. She had brought a wolf into her home. The fire crackled inside. Elena laid the creature on an old fleece blanket near the hearth. It whimpered again as she removed the makeshift bandage and began to clean the wound with warm water and iodine. "You're lucky I keep a first aid kit," she murmured. "Though I never thought I'd be stitching up a wolf." She worked in silence, the way she always did. The stitches were rough but held. She wrapped the leg in gauze and tucked the animal in with another blanket. Outside, the storm intensified. Wind pounded the windows. Ice rattled the panes. Inside, the cabin was a world apart. Quiet. Safe. Elena sat in her worn armchair, wrapped in a shawl, watching the wolf sleep. She didn't name it. Not yet. She didn't want to grow attached. But something stirred in her chest she hadn't felt in years. A sense of purpose. The days passed. The wolf, she eventually named him Ghost, for his pale fur and silent demeanor, began to recover. He didn't try to escape. He didn't bare his teeth or snap. He simply watched her, alert and wary, but never aggressive. Elena read aloud to him at night. It was silly, she knew, but something about the rhythm of her voice seemed to calm him. She resumed her photography during the day, wandering the woods with her camera while Ghost rested at home. She captured the frost-draped trees, the sun breaking through the clouds, the way the snow curled around the antlers of a lone stag. Each picture reminded her of the life still pulsing beneath winter's stillness. And each evening, she returned to the cabin and found Ghost waiting. Not like a pet. Like a guardian. One night, as she sat by the fire playing Ryan's old flute, a soft, haunting melody, Ghost rose and padded to her side. He lay down near her feet and released a low, mournful whine. She paused, fingers hovering. The tune had once been a lullaby, a song Ryan played by the lake where he proposed. Now, the notes floated through the cabin like ghosts themselves. Tears filled her eyes. And for the first time in 5 years, she didn't cry alone. Ghost lifted his head and rested it on her lap. In that moment, something shifted. Not between woman and wolf, but between two souls, broken in different ways, choosing not to heal alone. But peace, as always, is fragile. That night, just before sleep, Elena stepped out to gather firewood from the stack beside the shed. She noticed the prints immediately: deep, fresh boot tracks far too large to be hers. They led from the tree lean to the cabin, and back again. She felt the prickle of danger down her spine. The next morning, Ghost was gone. The door hadn't been broken, but it stood slightly ajar. On the floor, scratches. On the threshold, blood. Outside, one thing clear in the snow. The door creaked on its hinges, pushed gently by the morning wind. Elena stood motionless in the threshold, her breath forming clouds in the frozen air. Her heart thudded in her chest, not from the cold, but from the emptiness of the room behind her. Ghost was gone. The fire had burned low. The fleece blanket lay crumpled near the hearth, speckled with a fresh smear of blood. Her eyes followed the signs: scratches on the wooden floor, muddy prints, paw and boot, and something more sinister. The cabin hadn't been ransacked. No broken window, no forced entry. Someone had simply walked in and taken him. She stepped outside, snow crunching beneath her boots. The prints were clear now in the fresh layer that had fallen overnight, a deep tread from heavy boots, curving through the trees toward the gully in the northwest. The same direction she'd rescued Ghost from weeks ago. She felt the cold even through her coat. Someone had been watching her. Someone knew about him. And they'd come back for him. Elena didn't hesitate. She ran inside, grabbed her satchel, stuffed it with gauze, iodine, her hunting knife, a torch, and the worn whistle Ryan had carved her years ago, a whistle shaped like a curled leaf, tuned to a soft, haunting pitch. She'd used it to call dogs in the past, and lately, Ghost had responded to it as if it meant something only they shared. She shoved it into her pocket, grabbed her camera out of habit, and set off toward the trees. The forest was still, as if holding its breath. The prints led deeper than she had ever dared to go alone. Elena's cabin sat at the edge of the old forest, but beyond the known trails, the pines grew denser, older, darker. The terrain dipped and curved into hollows and rises, where moss-covered stones jutted like bones from the earth. She followed the trail with purpose, checking each branch, each bent twig, for signs. After nearly an hour, she heard the crack of a twig ahead. She dropped low behind a ridge, heart hammering. Slowly, she crawled to the crest and peered over. There 3 figures. Men. One knelt by a crude cage made of metal and chain link. Inside it, Ghost lay curled, bloodied, and silent. Her stomach lurched. Must be worth a fortune, one man said, crouching beside the cage. He wore a beanie pulled low over his eyes and a green military-style coat. His voice was thick with a northern accent. Rare breed, said another. Maybe even wild stock. Haven't seen a white one like this since Norway. He's young, healthy. That leg's healing. The third, the tallest, spat into the snow. We sell him fast. Before anyone finds out. Ghost growled weakly. The men laughed. Rage bloomed in Elena's chest. Not fear. Fury. She reached for her satchel, fingers shaking. There was no phone signal out here. No one to call. But she had her camera. She pulled it out silently and began snapping photos, using the zoom lens to catch their faces, the cage, Ghost's condition. Evidence. She'd need it later. If there was a later. Her mind raced. She could try to circle around and scare them off, but what if they hurt Ghost in the process? Her fingers brushed the whistle in her coat pocket. No, it was risky. But it might be her only chance. She backed away slowly, moving down the ridge and circling through the trees, coming up behind their camp. She found a fallen log just 20 feet from the cage and crouched behind it, out of sight. Then she pulled the whistle to her lips. And blew. A single, soft note. It floated through the trees like mist, haunting and strange. Ghost stirred. His ears perked. His head lifted. She blew it again, longer. Ghost let out a low, rumbling growl. One of the men turned sharply. What was that? I heard it too, said the beanie wearer, pulling a knife from his boot. They stood, scanning the trees. Elena gripped the log tighter. Probably just wind, the tall one muttered, stepping back toward the cage. And that's when Ghost lunged. With a burst of fury, he slammed his body into the cage wall. The chain link groaned. The men jumped back as he snarled, teeth flashing, jaws snapping against the metal. In that moment of panic, Elena made her move. She leapt from the log, rushing toward the cage with the knife in hand. The men shouted. Too late. She sliced the tie securing the gate. Ghost burst out, limping but fast, lunging at the tall man's arm. The man screamed. Run, Ghost! Elena shouted, her voice hoarse. Ghost turned and bounded into the trees, disappearing like mist into the shadows. Elena followed, ducking a swipe from the beanie man's knife and crashing through the underbrush behind her companion. Bullets rang out behind her. Branches splintered. Snow exploded. She didn't stop. She didn't look back. Only ran. They didn't stop running until the sun had dipped below the horizon and the trees thinned into familiar territory. By then, Elena's lungs burned. Her coat was torn. Her hands bled from a fall. Ghost stumbled beside her, panting heavily, his white fur smeared with blood and dirt. She dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around him. You're okay, she whispered into his neck. You're safe now. His chest heaved with exhaustion, but he pressed his head into her shoulder. They sat like that in the snow, two broken things made whole again by love and loyalty. But Elena knew this wasn't over. She had seen the rage in the men's eyes, heard the greed in their voices. They wouldn't give up. Not easily. That night, back at the cabin, Elena cleaned Ghost's wounds again. She fed him broth and wrapped his leg in fresh bandages. Then she uploaded the photos from her camera onto her laptop. Faces. Cage. Blood. Enough to report to the local wildlife trust. Maybe even the police. If they took her seriously. She could. Elena had always known the forest held stories. Etched into the twisted trunks, whispered between shifting leaves, buried under moss and thyme. But she never expected those stories would involve her. Or that blood would be part of them. The next morning, pale light spilled across the cabin floor as Elena sat on the worn wooden bench near the hearth, a map spread across the table. Ghost lay nearby, his injured leg wrapped tightly, but his eyes were alert. Watching her, as if sensing the weight of her thoughts. She traced a circle around the northwest gully, where she'd found the cage. That area was supposed to be protected land off limits to hunting, logging, and certainly poaching. And yet, those men had operated there with ease. How? She called the local wildlife trust using her satellite line. Reaching Daniel Brewer, a ranger she'd known in passing, a quiet man who once brought her an injured owl. Daniel, it's Elena Wren, she said, skipping greetings. I have proof someone's been trapping wildlife. Specifically a wolf, near Hollow Bend. I have photos. His voice was cautious. A wolf. I know what I saw. And I know it's rare, but this one is real. Young. Intelligent. Someone came to take him. I think they'll come again. There was silence. Then, send the photos. I'll come by in the morning. She hung up and sighed. A start but barely. That evening, Elena took Ghost outside. The snow had crusted over, but the woods gleamed under the stars, brittle branches glinting with frost. He limped beside her but refused to stay in. There was something he wanted to show her. He led her beyond the familiar trail, farther than she normally walked, toward a grove she hadn't visited in years. It stood at the base of a high ridge, half hidden behind dense pine and a wall of tangled undergrowth. She had to push branches aside to get through. And there, in a ring of stones and twisted roots, lay something that made her breath catch. Bones. Dozens of them. Animal skulls, some cracked. Metal traps half buried in leaves. Rope. Rusted tools. And a post nailed into the center tree, with a fresh red slash carved into the bark. It was a warning. Her stomach turned. This place wasn't just used once. It had been used for years. Ghost sniffed the air and whined low in his throat. His eyes flicked back toward the dark. Elena. She spun. It was Daniel the ranger. But something was wrong. He wasn't supposed to be here until morning. His voice was different. Forced. She stepped backward instinctively. He held up a hand. It's okay. I just wanted to see it myself. How did you find me? He didn't answer. Ghost growled. Elena glanced at the post again. That mark. It wasn't random. It was a symbol she remembered from old forest signs, used by poachers to claim territory. It had been carved recently. Daniel stepped closer. And in his other hand, she saw it, a tranquilizer gun. You should have stayed quiet, Elena. These woods don't belong to you. Her heart slammed into her ribs. You're one of them, she whispered. Not one, Elena. The one, he said softly. These forests stopped feeding people years ago. I helped them feed again. She bolted. Ghost lunged toward him, teeth bared. But the shot came fast. The dart hit the wolf's shoulder. He yelped, stumbled. No. Elena turned back, adrenaline surging. She reached Ghost just as he collapsed in the snow, breath heaving. His eyes fluttered. Daniel advanced, smug. I didn't want to hurt him. Or you. But now you've seen too much. Elena stood her ground. If you kill me, there'll be more. I sent the photos. You'll be found. Daniel smiled. That's the difference between you and me. I don't leave evidence. But Ghost stirred. Slowly. Weakly. His eyes locked on Elena. She knew then, he still had enough strength. She blew the whistle. One piercing note. Ghost responded instantly, surging to his feet, eyes wild with fire. In one leap, he knocked Daniel to the ground, teeth sinking into his arm. The tranquilizer gun flew from his grip. Elena scrambled for it. Daniel screamed, trying to shove Ghost away. Elena raised the gun. And shot. Another dart hit his thigh. He staggered. Ghost stepped back as Daniel slumped into the snow, unconscious. Elena rushed to the wolf and dropped to her knees. You incredible boy, she sobbed, hugging him. You stayed for me. He whimpered but wagged his tail faintly. She dialed emergency wildlife control on her sat phone. The authorities arrived before dawn. Daniel was arrested. His stash in the woods documented, his crimes uncovered. Turns out, he'd been running a quiet poaching operation for years, hiding behind his ranger title, selling rare animals to private collectors. Elena's photos sealed it. But her heart stayed with Ghost, who spent 2 days recovering, during which he refused to eat unless she was beside him. By the 3rd day, he walked again. Still limping, but proud. And on the 5th morning, he led her to a trail she'd never seen. It ended at a small, frozen lake. The frost had melted, but Elena still felt the chill in her bones. Not from the cold but from the knowledge that she had been walking through a haunted forest her whole life and never known it. The arrest of Daniel Brewer had shaken the community, but whispers quickly replaced shock. People had seen strange trucks. They had heard muffled cries deep in the woods. They had looked the other way. Now they couldn't. And neither could Elena. Ghost had returned to strength with remarkable speed. But what remained in his eyes was not just alertness, it was purpose. He wasn't content to lie by the fire anymore. He wanted to go somewhere. Somewhere she couldn't yet see. They hiked for 3 hours along a path Ghost clearly remembered but Elena never knew existed. He stayed ahead of her, stopping often, looking back with eyes that said come on. She followed through tangles of brambles, over fallen logs, and into an untouched corner of the forest so deep and silent, it felt like they'd stepped out of time. Then she saw it. A ruined structure, hidden beneath the roots of a collapsed cedar. Moss and snow blanketed its roof. A rusted fence surrounded it in a crude circle. A small metal sign, almost illegible, hung by one bent nail, wildlife study area, no trespassing. It had been forgotten. Ghost crept inside. Elena followed, heart thudding. Inside were cages. Empty now but their shapes told enough. Gnawed corners. Deep scratches. A cracked bowl. And on the wall, photographs. Yellowed, curling at the edges. Wolves. Dozens of them. Tagged, numbered, studied. One photo made her freeze. Ghost just a pup. Wounded. Wide-eyed. Alone. Elena, a voice called behind her. She turned, heart hammering. A woman stood at the threshold. Tall. Weathered. Her eyes, steel gray. She held a walking stick made from twisted yew and wore a coat patched so many times it looked quilted. I thought I'd never see him again, she said. Elena stood still. Who are you? The woman stepped forward slowly. My name is Isolde. I worked here once. Long before Brewer turned this place into a trap. We were studying wolf intelligence. Vocalization. Emotion. She knelt beside Ghost. He stared at her with quiet recognition. You knew him. I raised him, Isolde said softly. He was born here. His mother died giving birth. Ghost was the runt. They wanted to put him down. I refused. Why did you leave him? I was forced out when funding ran dry. The station was shut down. The others left. But I came back. Quietly. I lived deeper in the woods. Until Brewer arrived. I couldn't stop him alone. Elena's heart twisted. He's been waiting. For someone. All this time. Isolde looked at her, then at the whistle around her neck. That belonged to me once. It was how I called him. Elena touched the whistle. He found me. He came to me. Isolde nodded. Then he chose you. Ghost licked Isolde's hand. Then turned to Elena, his tail sweeping softly behind him. There's something more, Isolde said. Something he's trying to show you. That night, they stayed in the ruin. Isolde lit a fire in the old stove. They spoke of the past of wolves trained not with dominance but with compassion. Of tests that showed wolves could remember kindness years later. That they could mourn. That they could love. And that some, like Ghost, could choose family beyond blood. In the silence, Ghost rose and padded to a corner of the ruin. He pawed the ground once, twice, then began to dig. Beneath the dirt was a small wooden box. Elena opened it. Inside, a journal. Faded. Water damaged. But legible. She opened it carefully. It was Isolde's. Pages filled with notes on Ghost. His first howl. His first successful tracking. His reaction to music. His grief when a fellow pup died. And drawing simple, emotional sketches of Ghost sleeping beside her boots. Ghost watching birds. Ghost following her whistle like a shadow. And at the back a final note, never sent. To whoever finds this, if Ghost is still alive, know that he is not just a survivor. He is the result of something rare: patience, love, trust. Treat him as a soul, not a specimen. And he will protect you, even when the world turns dark. Elena shut the book, eyes wet. I think he remembered everything, she whispered. He did, Isolde said. They all do. The wind howled outside, but the little ruin stayed warm. And in that warmth, Elena realized something deeper than gratitude. Ghost hadn't just been saved. He had saved her too. At dawn, Isolde prepared to leave again. There's a den near the northern cliff, she said. Brewer never found it. I'll stay there. I still belong to the forest. You're welcome in the cabin, Elena offered. Isolde smiled. The snow had stopped falling, but the sky was still silver, heavy with clouds that carried stories instead of storms. Elena stood at the edge of the forest behind her cabin, the whistle warm between her fingers. Ghost sat beside her, ears high, body still as carved stone. They had heard it again. Not a breeze, not a branch creak. A howl. But not his. It had come from the north. A sound that didn't echo the loneliness or longing Ghost once howled with. But something wilder. Sharper. Almost a challenge. Ghost didn't return it. He simply looked at her, then back toward the trees. He was waiting for her decision. Isolde had called it the ash moon this time of year when the wolves once performed a silent ritual. Not a mating season. Not a hunting pact. Something older. A reunion of memory. It only happens once every 7 years, she had said before vanishing into the trees. And only for those who still remember what they lost. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She read the old journal again by lantern light. Her breath fogged the glass. Ghost curled near the door. One line kept haunting her. Not all wolves forget. Some are still searching for their family, even in humans. The next morning, Ghost nudged her awake before dawn. No bark. No growl. Just a look. And a step toward the door. The howl had returned. This time closer. He wanted to go. And he wanted her with him. The forest was different this time. The trees seemed to breathe with them. The frost shimmered on every branch, glittering like glass teeth. The silence wasn't threatening. It was sacred. They walked until they reached the northern cliffs. Elena recognized them from Isolde's mention. Beyond the ridge, the forest dropped into a hidden basin, surrounded by stone outcroppings and snow-draped trees. Ghost stopped. His ears perked. Then a shape moved in the mist below, then 2, then 5. Wolves. Real wolves. Not like Ghost, not like him in spirit though they looked like him in flesh. These were leaner, paler. One had a torn ear. Another had a strange black blaze on its chest like a burned tree. And one, the largest, stepped forward and howled. Low, deep, melancholic. Ghost didn't return it. He walked down the hill. Elena's heart raced. She couldn't follow immediately. She was afraid. Not of the wolves, but of what Ghost might find, or lose. What if they called him home? What if he left her? She finally climbed down, breath sharp in her throat. The wolves circled Ghost but didn't touch him. They sniffed, twitched ears, danced low steps around him like ancient rites. Then, the alpha, the one with the torn ear, stepped close. They stared at each other for what felt like eternity. Ghost gave one low growl, then turned and walked toward Elena. The wolves didn't follow. Instead, they melted back into the trees. Back at the cabin, Ghost rested with his head on her lap. Elena couldn't help the tears. You didn't go with them. He lifted his eyes slowly. Calm. Fierce. He had chosen her again. But now, she knew something was coming. Something bigger than just her and Ghost. That night, someone knocked on the door. Not with fists. With claws. Elena opened the door slowly. Not a wolf. A dog. Half-starved. Wet. Bleeding. She knelt, opened her arms. He limped inside. Ghost looked up from his blanket and stood slowly. Their eyes locked. No growl. No bark. Just recognition. Elena examined the dog's tags. Faded. But one word stood out. Marlowe. A memory sparked. She grabbed a folder from the drawer. A missing pet report. 3 years old. Marlowe, German Shepherd mix. Disappeared near Hallow Pines. Owner deceased in a car crash just a week later. No one had come looking. Until now. Ghost stepped forward and licked the dog's ears. Marlowe collapsed into sleep beside the fire. The next day, Isolde returned. I saw them, Elena said. Ghost's kind. Isolde nodded. They saw you too. They'll remember? Elena looked at Ghost, then at Marlowe. He brought another lost one home. That's what the ash moon does, Isolde whispered. It calls the forgotten. Later that night, Elena found a torn scrap of paper wedged under her porch. It read only, "The den was never empty." The forest had gone quiet. Not peaceful, hushed, like it was holding its breath. It had been 3 days since the scrap of paper appeared under Elena's porch. 3 days since Marlowe, the lost dog, collapsed beside the fire and whispered trust through trembling limbs. 3 days since Ghost refused to sleep more than an hour at a time, pacing the floor, ears constantly tilting towards sounds Elena couldn't hear. Isolde hadn't returned. That terrified Elena more than anything. The first sign came at dawn. A bloodied feather on her windowsill. It wasn't from a common bird. Not from the jays or crows that danced through the treetops. This feather was striped with silver and red. Smooth. Almost ceremonial. She brought it to Ghost. He growled low in his chest, then nudged her to the back door. They walked in silence, Marlowe trailing close. At the edge of the woods near the northern cliff, Ghost stopped. Elena saw it then, scorch marks. Blackened earth in a perfect circle, as if something had burned from underneath, not above. And in the center, a twisted cage, snapped open, wires still smoldering. Marlowe whined. Ghost sniffed the air. Then his hackles rose. A scent. A memory. Something was back. They returned to the cabin by nightfall, but Elena couldn't rest. She turned the feather over in her hands again. There was something etched along the shaft barely visible. Tiny symbols. Carved, not natural. And not just symbols, coordinates. She used her grandfather's old forest map, unrolled it across the table, tracing the lines. The coordinates led to the southern marsh, a place locals avoided. There were stories. Sunken creatures. Disappearing hunters. Unnatural echoes. But she'd never believed them. Now, she had no choice. Elena packed a bag. Ghost was already waiting by the door. Marlowe whimpered but followed anyway. The marsh was 2 hours away. She moved fast, flashlight slicing through mist, boots sloshing through mud and dead roots. By the time she reached the marker, the fog had thickened. But something shined through it. A tower barely standing, rusted through, but humming with power. She approached cautiously. A chain-link fence surrounded it, torn in places. Inside were solar panels, blinking consoles, and cages. Some were empty. One wasn't. Inside it, barely conscious, was a young wolf. Collared, weak, but alive. Elena rushed forward, but before she could touch the cage, a voice echoed from the mist. "You don't belong here." She turned slowly. A man stepped from the trees. Black coat. Cold eyes. Not a hunter. No rifle. But something worse. A scientist. "I should have guessed the whistle would resurface," he said. "We always suspected the woman who raised Subject Theta would break protocol. But we didn't think she'd infect you." Ghost growled, teeth bared. "Back," Elena said sharply. "Now." The man stepped closer. "That wolf was designed to bond. We enhanced his limbic systems. Tweaked his memory pathways. Increased empathy responses. All for long-range loyalty studies. You treated him like a lab rat. He is one." Ghost lunged forward, but stopped at Elena's hand. "You want him," the man said coldly. "Fine. Take him. But the others. They won't stop. The ash moon draws them out. And now that it's begun again, we're watching." He smiled. And vanished into the mist. They took the young wolf home. Elena removed the collar. His eyes flicked open, pale, and distant. But when Ghost touched his nose to the pup's forehead, something shifted. The pup closed his eyes again, but calmer. Safe. That night, Isolde finally returned, wounded, bruised, but alive. "They're not poachers," she whispered. "They're harvesters. Collecting traits. Testing emotions. Trying to replicate what nature took millennia to craft." She slumped into the chair. "They're not just experimenting with wolves. They're planning to release them. With controlled behaviors. Hunters that appear natural, but serve commands. Elena whispered, weapons. Isolde nodded. Ghost stood tall beside her, ears forward, heart steady. He's not just your protector now, Isolde said. He's the last true one. The others will come. They'll remember his scent. His howl. They'll listen? To what? Elena asked. To a leader. By the time dawn brushed frost over the trees, the cabin clearing was no longer silent. It pulsed with life. Ghost stood tall, watchful at the edge of the porch as 9 wolves lingered in the shadows. They came in the night. Alone or in pairs. Drawn from distant corners of the wild. Some limped. Some growled low with suspicion. One bore a long scar across his snout. Another had a milky white eye. Yet all of them responded to the whistle's call. And to him. Elena watched from the window, heart heavy with awe and fear. It was like something ancient was awakening. Something older than science, older than the experiment that created Ghost. A truth buried in fur and memory. The wolves hadn't come for her. They'd come for him. Inside, the rescued young wolf, now named Ash, stirred from sleep. His wounds were healing, but slowly. Ghost checked on him regularly. Gentle nudges, protective glances. Marlowe stayed close to Ash too, surprising even Elena. The dog had once shivered at the scent of wolves. Now he shared his water bowl. Elena kept busy boiling herbs, preparing food, organizing supplies. Isolde hadn't spoken much since her return, but her presence felt steady, like a tree that bent in storm but never broke. They remember more than scent, Isolde said softly, looking at the wolves through the frost-glazed window. They remember pain. What was done. What they lost. And what now? Elena asked. Isolde took a deep breath. Now, they remember Ghost. By midday, another wolf arrived. This one was different. Larger. Sleeker. His coat shimmered with deep charcoal streaks. No limping. No caution. He didn't stay in the shadows. He walked straight into the clearing, tail high, golden eyes scanning every face. Ghost stepped off the porch to meet him. The other wolves parted. Isolde tensed. That's Verac. Elena whispered, you know him. I saw him in the lab once. He was Ghost's predecessor. Version 6. Temperament unpredictable. They said he bonded briefly. Then turned. The 2 wolves stood nose to nose. Still. Breath fogging the air between them. Then Verac snapped. A blur of teeth and muscle. Ghost twisted, dodging, growling deep and low. The others didn't interfere. Yet. Elena rushed forward, but Isolde held her back. No, this has to happen. They'll kill each other. Not if Ghost remembers who he is. The fight was fierce but brief. Verac lunged again, but Ghost didn't retaliate with rage. He moved with precision. Shoulder low, jaw tight. He didn't aim to kill. He aimed to remind. After several furious exchanges, Ghost pinned Verac to the frozen ground. But he didn't bite. He stepped back. And howled. Soft. Echoing. A sound full of loss. And forgiveness. Verac froze. His growl faltered. Then, to everyone's shock, he lowered his head. The rest of the pack howled in unison. Elena's heart pounded so hard it hurt. That night, Isolde laid out old pages on the table. Maps. Documents. Blueprints. There's one more facility, she said. Deep in the pine moor, underground. That's where the last of the test wolves are kept. Some never saw the wild. Why haven't we gone there? Elena asked. Because it's guarded. And they don't need cages anymore. They have something worse. She held up a grainy photo. A large, black wolf-like creature with 2 long limbs. Glowing blue eyes. No reflection in the glass. They called it Echo, she whispered. He doesn't remember anything. Not love. Not names. Only commands. They want to release him, make him the model. Can he be saved? Ghost growled low from the corner. Isolde met Elena's eyes. I don't know. By morning, The pack had grown to 12. Varric stayed near Ghost now, ears flicking toward every sound. Marlowe had taken to sleeping beside Ash. But the forest didn't feel safe anymore. The wind carried new scents. Metal, smoke, chemicals, and fear. Elena stood at the edge of the porch, Ghost beside her, as snow began to fall again. From deep in the forest came a sound unlike any howl. Low, warped, synthetic. Echo was coming. And he wouldn't remember anything. Not the forests. Not the moon. Not the woman who once whistled him to sleep as a pup. The pine maw loomed ahead, a dark, twisted forest where the trees grew dense and tangled, as if nature itself had fought against the weight of something unnatural. The winds howled louder here, but it wasn't a sound of the wild, it was the echo of something broken. Elena stood at the forest's edge, clutching the whistle in her trembling hand. Ghost stood beside her, his fur sleek and dark against the pale snow. His golden eyes reflected a quiet, determined strength. He had led the pack this far. Now, he was ready to face the final test. Isolde stood with her, her face set with an unspoken grief. She had helped raise these wolves, once, before they were stolen by the men who thought they could bend nature to their will. But now, she was here to correct that mistake. We have to move quickly, Isolde said. Once they realize we're coming, they'll send Echo ahead to stop us. He's their weapon, the culmination of everything they tried to force these wolves to become. Elena's heart clenched. Can we stop him? Isolde hesitated, her gaze shifting to the deep woods where shadows seemed to swirl. We can try. But Echo doesn't know love, Elena. He's been trained not to feel. He's a tool, something much worse than the others. We need to get to him before he becomes something irredeemable. The pack moved with purpose. Varric, now fully accepted by Ghost, led the group. The others followed, alert but steady, their instincts guiding them through the treacherous paths of the pine maw. Each step brought them closer to the heart of the facility, where the sounds of machinery hummed beneath the earth, the terrible hum of something man-made. As they approached the entrance, a rusted metal gate buried deep in the roots of the ancient trees. Elena could feel her pulse quickening. The forest was alive with danger, the air thick with tension. But there was something else too. A distant howl. Elena froze. That's him, she whispered. The pack stopped, ears pricked. Even Ghost seemed to sense the shift in the air. Echo. The door to the facility creaked open, the faint sound of footsteps echoing from below. A figure emerged from the shadows. Tall, dark, and eerily still. His fur was jet black, his eyes glowing a cold, unnatural blue. The pack stiffened. Varric growled low, his muscles tensing. Ghost stepped forward, a soft growl rising in his throat. But it wasn't a challenge. It was a call. A sound that only those who shared his blood could understand. For a moment, Echo stood silent, watching them. The cold blue light in his eyes flickered like a dying star. Then, slowly, he took a step forward. I am Echo. His voice was low, almost mechanical, as if it were something forced into his mind. I do not remember. I do not need to. Ghost's tail flicked once, the smallest sign of understanding. He stood taller now, the weight of his role clear in his gaze. This was his brother. His lost brother. And yet, the bond that should have been there wasn't. Not anymore. Elena stepped forward, her voice soft but clear. Echo, it's me. You remember me, don't you? The whistle, the sounds of the forest. For the briefest moment, Echo's posture shifted. His eyes wavered, and something human glimmered within them. But then, like a machine rebooting, the light returned, cold and empty. No, he said, his voice hardening again. I don't remember. And in the next heartbeat, he lunged. The battle that followed was brutal, more than anything Elena could have imagined. Echo fought like a shadow, fast and unforgiving, his movements twisted and unnatural. The pack surrounded him, but Echo was no longer one of them. He was a weapon. A creation designed to fight without feeling. Ghost met him head-on. The two wolves collided with the force of a storm. Teeth bared, fur flying. They were equals in strength, but Ghost held the weight of a bond. Of something real that Echo had never known. Varric leapt in, distracting Echo just long enough for Ghost to land a decisive blow. The sound of bones cracking echoed through the clearing. Echo howled. A sound that was more mechanical than beastly. Before he crumpled to the ground, Elena rushed forward, breathless. "He's still alive," she whispered, her heart pounding. The pack had already surrounded him, standing over him as though waiting for the final word. Ghost's eyes met hers, the weariness of the battle reflected in his gaze. But there was something else there. Something softer. He lowered his head. Elena knelt beside Echo, touching his fur, gently pulling him into her arms. "Echo," she whispered. "Remember the forest. Remember me." For a moment, the coldness in his eyes began to fade, and something stirred in the depths of him. A flicker of recognition. A faint memory of the past. But it was brief. Gone as quickly as it came. "We'll take him home," Elena said, her voice steady. The journey back was long, the weight of the pack heavy upon them. Echo, now subdued, walked beside Ghost, but there was no joy in his stride. He wasn't the same wolf he had once been. The memory of what he had become, the tool, the weapon, was too deep. But in the way he leaned against Ghost's shoulder, there was a glimmer of something almost human. Hope. Days passed, and Echo slowly adapted to the rhythm of life in the cabin. He didn't speak much. But sometimes, in the dead of night, when Elena stood outside listening to the wind, she would hear it. A soft howl. A gentle, mournful sound. The wolves had returned to the wild, and the whistle. Her whistle had brought them home. As winter's grip loosened and spring began to blossom, Elena stood in the clearing, Ghost by her side. Echo stood at the edge of the forest, watching. The others had gone. Varric had returned to the mountains. The pack was scattered, but Elena knew they would come back. They always did. But Echo, he hadn't left. He had found his place. No longer a weapon. No longer a tool. A wolf, in the wild. And as the sun set, the air thick with the scent of pine and snow, Elena raised the whistle to her lips. A soft note filled the air. And Echo howled. If you've been touched by the bond between human and animal, and you believe that love, compassion, and understanding can heal even the deepest scars, share this story with those who may need to hear it. Let the wild remember, and let the